Sarah Martinez never expected her life to change on a Tuesday morning in March. She had been working as a security guard at Naval Base San Diego for only 3 months, and most days felt like a blur of checking IDs, scanning badges, and directing visitors to the right buildings. At 24, she was one of the youngest guards on the base, and definitely the only one who still got butterflies in her stomach every time a high-ranking officer approached her station. The morning started like any other. Sarah arrived at Gate 3 at 6:30 sharp, relieving the night shift guard who looked ready to collapse from exhaustion. The California sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon, casting long shadows across the concrete barriers and metal detectors that formed her daily workspace. She adjusted her uniform, checked her equipment, and settled into what she expected would be another routine day of gate duty. Gate 3 wasn't the main entrance to the base. It was primarily used for deliveries, maintenance crews, and lower-level personnel who didn't need access to the more secure areas. Most days, Sarah would see the same faces: truck drivers delivering supplies, civilian contractors heading to repair jobs, and junior enlisted personnel taking shortcuts to their assignments. It wasn't glamorous work, but Sarah took pride in doing it well. Her supervisor, Sergeant Williams, had impressed upon her the importance of following protocols exactly. Every ID had to be checked thoroughly, every vehicle inspected, and every visitor logged into the system. There was no room for shortcuts or assumptions, especially for someone as new as Sarah. She had memorized the procedures until she could recite them in her sleep, and she never let anyone pass without proper verification. The first few hours passed quietly. A delivery truck brought fresh produce to the base cafeteria. 2 civilian electricians arrived to work on some wiring issues in Building C. A handful of sailors returned from weekend leave, looking slightly worse for wear but carrying proper identification. Sarah processed each one with professional efficiency, her movements becoming more confident with each interaction. Around 9 o'clock, things started to get busier. A convoy of 3 black SUVs approached the gate, their windows tinted so dark that Sarah couldn't see inside. This wasn't unusual. High-ranking officials often traveled in similar vehicles when visiting the base. She stepped out of her booth, clipboard in hand, ready to follow standard protocol. The lead vehicle stopped at her position, and the driver's window rolled down to reveal a Navy petty officer she didn't recognize. He handed her a stack of identification cards and a manifest listing all the passengers in the convoy. Sarah began her inspection, checking each ID against the manifest and cross-referencing the names with her computer system. As she worked, she could feel eyes watching her from inside the vehicles. It made her slightly nervous, but she forced herself to focus on the task at hand. Every name checked out, every photo matched, and all the security clearances were current and valid. She was about to wave the convoy through when something caught her attention. One of the IDs belonged to someone listed as contractor maintenance. But when Sarah looked more closely at the photo, something seemed off. The face looked familiar, but she couldn't place where she might have seen it before. More importantly, the security badge didn't match the type typically issued to maintenance contractors. It was the wrong color, and the magnetic strip appeared to be a different format than what she was used to seeing. Sarah's training kicked in. When in doubt, verify. She politely asked the driver to wait while she made a quick phone call to confirm the contractor's credentials. This wasn't an unusual request, and legitimate visitors were always understanding about additional security checks. But as she reached for her phone, she noticed something that made her pause. Through the rear window of the middle SUV, she caught a glimpse of someone in military dress uniform. The sight was brief, but what she saw made her heart skip a beat. The uniform appeared to have insignia that indicated very high rank, far higher than what would be expected in a routine maintenance convoy. Now Sarah was genuinely confused. Why would a high-ranking officer be traveling with maintenance contractors? Why would they be using Gate 3 instead of the main entrance where VIPs typically entered? And why did that contractor's ID seem suspicious? She decided to trust her instincts. Instead of calling to verify the contractor, she used her radio to contact Sergeant Williams. She kept her voice calm and professional, but she made it clear that she had concerns about the convoy at her station. Sergeant Williams, this is Martinez at Gate 3. I have a convoy here with some irregularities in the documentation. Could you please send someone to assist with verification? The response came back immediately. Copy that, Martinez. Hold the convoy at your position. Do not allow entry until further notice. Sarah felt a mix of relief and anxiety. She was confident she had made the right decision, but she also knew that detaining a convoy could be a serious matter if she was wrong. She approached the lead vehicle and politely informed the driver that there would be a brief delay while they verified some information. The driver's reaction was immediate and telling. Instead of the understanding response she expected from someone with legitimate business, he became agitated. He demanded to know what the problem was, insisted that they were expected and running late, and suggested that a new guard was causing unnecessary delays. This reaction only strengthened Sarah's conviction that something wasn't right. In her 3 months on the job, she had never encountered truly legitimate visitors who became hostile when asked to wait for verification. Professional military personnel and contractors understood the importance of security procedures and were typically patient with additional checks. Within minutes, Sergeant Williams arrived with 2 military police officers. Sarah quickly briefed them on her concerns. The mismatched contractor ID, the unexpected presence of high-ranking personnel in what was supposed to be a maintenance convoy, and the driver's hostile reaction to routine verification procedures. Sergeant Williams took over the situation, approaching the lead vehicle with the authority that came from 15 years of military experience. Sarah watched as he examined the documents she had flagged, his expression growing increasingly serious. What happened next would be seared into Sarah's memory forever. As Sergeant Williams was reviewing the IDs, the rear door of the middle SUV opened, and a man in Navy dress uniform stepped out. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she saw the insignia on his uniform clearly for the first time. The man was a Navy SEAL commander, one of the most elite and respected positions in the entire military. His uniform was immaculate, his bearing unmistakably that of someone accustomed to command, and his presence seemed to fill the entire area around the gate. But what struck Sarah most was his expression, not anger or irritation at being delayed, but something that looked almost like approval. The commander walked directly toward Sarah's position, his stride confident and purposeful. As he approached, Sarah felt her training take over. She stood at attention, her posture straight and professional despite the confusion swirling in her mind about what was really happening. When the commander reached her position, he stopped directly in front of her. For a moment that seemed to stretch on forever, he simply looked at her, not with the dismissive glance she might have expected, but with careful assessment. Sarah felt as though she was being evaluated in ways she couldn't fully understand. Then, in a gesture that would change everything, the commander rendered a slow, deliberate salute. Not the quick acknowledgement that senior officers might give to enlisted personnel, but a full, formal salute that conveyed unmistakable respect and recognition. Sarah, following protocol, returned the salute crisply. But she was completely bewildered by what was happening. Why was a SEAL commander saluting a security guard? Why was he here at all? And what was really going on with this convoy? The answer came in the commander's first words to her. "Guard Martinez," he said, his voice carrying the quiet authority that came from years of leading elite warriors. "You may have just prevented a significant security breach. Your attention to detail and willingness to trust your instincts when something seemed wrong. That's exactly the kind of vigilance that keeps installations like this safe." Sarah felt her world tilt slightly. A security breach? She had thought she was just doing routine verification of questionable documentation. The idea that something more serious might have been at stake hadn't fully occurred to her. Sergeant Williams approached, carrying the suspicious contractor ID that Sarah had flagged. His expression was grim as he addressed the commander. "Sir, this identification appears to be a sophisticated forgery. The magnetic strip contains data that doesn't match our systems, and the photograph has been altered using techniques that wouldn't be obvious to casual inspection." The commander nodded, then turned back to Sarah. "Guard Martinez, what made you suspicious of this particular ID? What caught your attention when others might have missed it?" Sarah took a deep breath, organizing her thoughts before responding. "Sir, the security badge was the wrong color for a maintenance contractor, and the magnetic strip format looked different from what I normally see. But more than that, something about the photo seemed off, like it might have been digitally altered. And when I saw a military dress uniform in what was supposed to be a maintenance convoy, I knew I needed to get supervision involved." The commander's expression grew increasingly approving. "You noticed details that many experienced personnel might have missed, and you trusted your instincts even when it meant potentially detaining what appeared to be legitimate visitors. That kind of judgment is exactly what we need, protecting our installations. As Sarah processed this praise from one of the most elite officers in the Navy, she began to understand that this morning had been far from routine. Whatever was really happening with this convoy, her decision to follow protocol and trust her instincts had apparently prevented something serious from occurring. But she also sensed that the full story was still unfolding, and that her role in these events was far from over. The commander gestured for Sarah to join him and Sergeant Williams away from the convoy, where they could speak more privately. As they walked, Sarah noticed that more military police had arrived, and the 3 vehicles were now surrounded by security personnel. The situation had clearly escalated far beyond a routine document verification. "Guard Martinez," the commander began, his voice low but clear. "What I'm about to tell you is classified, but given your involvement in these events, you need to understand what you've helped prevent today." Sarah nodded, her mind racing, as she tried to prepare herself for whatever revelation was coming. "This convoy was not what it appeared to be," the commander continued. "We've been tracking a sophisticated attempt to infiltrate this base using forged credentials and stolen vehicle identifications. The people in those SUVs are not Navy personnel or legitimate contractors. They're part of an organized group that has been attempting to gain access to classified naval installations along the West Coast." The weight of this information hit Sarah like a physical blow. She had been face to face with people who were actively trying to breach naval security, and she had been the one to stop them. The thought was both terrifying and surreal. Sergeant Williams added, "The fake contractor ID you spotted was just one piece of an elaborate scheme. They had forged manifests, stolen vehicle plates, and even counterfeit military uniforms. If they had gained access to the base, they could have gathered intelligence on naval operations, submarine schedules, and personnel information." Sarah felt her legs go slightly weak as the full implications sank in. "Sir, how did you know to be here? How did you know this was going to happen?" The commander's expression became almost paternal. "We didn't know it was going to happen here, Guard Martinez. We've been tracking this group for weeks, but they've been careful to avoid patterns that would allow us to predict their next move. Your vigilance at this gate was the first time we've been able to catch them in the act. What you need to understand," Sergeant Williams added, "is that we conduct random security assessments throughout the base. Different gates, different times, different scenarios. But this wasn't an assessment. This was the real thing, and you handled it exactly right." Sarah looked back toward the convoy, where she could now see several individuals being escorted out of the vehicles in handcuffs. The reality of the situation was still sinking in, but she was beginning to understand why the commander had saluted her. She hadn't just followed protocol, she had potentially prevented a serious breach of national security. "Sir," Sarah said hesitantly, "I have to ask, why are you here? I mean, a SEAL commander responding to a gate security incident seems like overkill." The commander finished with a slight smile. "Under normal circumstances, you'd be absolutely right, but this particular group has been responsible for security breaches at 3 other naval installations. Each time, they've managed to slip away before we could apprehend them. When we got word that suspicious activity was happening here, I wanted to be present for the takedown personally." He paused, studying Sarah's face. "What I didn't expect was to find that the person who stopped them was a security guard with 3 months of experience who spotted details that might have fooled personnel with years more training." Sarah felt a flush of pride, but also confusion. "Sir, I just followed my training. Sergeant Williams taught me to trust my instincts when something seems wrong. And that's exactly what saved the day," the commander replied. "But let me tell you something about instincts, Guard Martinez. They're only valuable if you have the courage to act on them. Many people might have noticed the same things you did, but they might have talked themselves out of their concerns. They might have worried about causing delays, or about questioning people who seem to have authority, or about being wrong and facing consequences." Sergeant Williams nodded emphatically. "The commander's right, Martinez. In my 15 years, I've seen too many security incidents happen because someone noticed something suspicious but didn't want to make waves. You made waves, and it was exactly the right thing to do." As they talked, Sarah became aware that their conversation was drawing attention from other personnel on the base. Word was spreading quickly that something significant had happened at Gate 3, and people were beginning to gather at a respectful distance to see what was going on. The commander noticed the growing audience as well. "Guard Martinez, what's happening here today is going to become known throughout this base, and probably throughout the entire naval district. You've done something remarkable, and people are going to want to recognize that achievement." Sarah felt a surge of anxiety. "Sir, I'm not sure I'm comfortable with a lot of attention. I was just doing my job." "I understand that feeling," the commander replied. "Most people who do extraordinary things in the military say exactly the same thing. But here's something you need to understand about leadership and about service. Sometimes doing your job exceptionally well means accepting recognition that makes you uncomfortable."
He gestured toward the growing crowd of onlookers.
"Every person on this base has a role in keeping it secure. But today, you demonstrated what it looks like when someone takes that responsibility seriously and has the skills and courage to act on it. That's not just doing your job, that's setting an example for everyone else about what excellence looks like." Sergeant Williams stepped closer to Sarah. "Martinez, the commander, is right about the recognition that's coming, but I want you to know that from my perspective, what matters most is that you've proven you have the judgment and instincts that could take you far in military or civilian security work." "What do you mean, Sergeant?" "I mean that what you demonstrated today, attention to detail, willingness to trust your instincts, calm under pressure, and courage to act when others might hesitate, those are the qualities that we look for in people we want to advance into positions of greater responsibility." The commander nodded. "Sergeant Williams is absolutely right. Guard Martinez, have you given any thought to what you want your long-term career to look like? Because based on what I've seen today, you have potential that extends far beyond gate duty." Sarah felt overwhelmed by the direction the conversation was taking. That morning, she had been worried about whether she was competent enough to handle routine security checks. Now she was being told by a SEAL commander that she had potential for career advancement based on her performance during what turned out to be a major security incident. "Sir, I honestly haven't thought much beyond proving that I can do this job well. This is still pretty new for me, and I've been focused on learning the basics." "That focus on fundamentals is part of what impressed me," the commander replied. "Too many people want to skip past the basics to get to more exciting assignments. But the basics are what matter when situations get serious. Your thorough approach to document verification, your systematic cross-referencing of information, your proper use of radio protocols. Those fundamentals are what allowed you to spot and stop a sophisticated infiltration attempt." As they continued talking, Sarah noticed that the crowd of onlookers was growing larger and more senior. She could see officers, senior enlisted personnel, and civilian employees all trying to understand what had happened at Gate 3. The attention was making her increasingly nervous. Sergeant Williams seemed to notice her discomfort. "Martinez, I know this is a lot to process, but I want you to remember something. Every person watching us right now is safer because of what you did today. This base is more secure because you paid attention to details and trusted your judgment. That's something to be proud of, not anxious about." The commander added, "And here's something else to remember, Guard Martinez. The people trying to infiltrate this base were professionals. They had sophisticated equipment, carefully crafted fake documents, and detailed knowledge of our procedures. They weren't amateurs who made obvious mistakes. The fact that you spotted their deception says something significant about your abilities." Sarah looked back toward the convoy one more time. The suspects had been loaded into military police vehicles and were being transported away, but the SUVs remained surrounded by security personnel who were conducting detailed searches of the vehicles and their contents. "Sir, what happens now? I mean, with the investigation and everything?" "Now the real work begins," the commander replied. "These individuals will be interrogated to determine who they were working for and what their ultimate objectives were. The evidence gathered from their vehicles and equipment will be analyzed to understand how sophisticated their operation was and whether there are other cells operating elsewhere." He paused, looking directly at Sarah. "And you, Guard Martinez, will be asked to provide detailed statements about everything you observed and every decision you made. Your testimony will be crucial to prosecuting these individuals and preventing future attempts." The thought of being involved in a prosecution was both exciting and intimidating. Sarah had never imagined that her job would involve anything more significant than checking IDs and directing traffic. Sergeant Williams seemed to read her thoughts. Martinez, I know this seems like a lot to take on, but remember that you've already done the hard part. You spotted the threat, you followed proper procedures, and you prevented a potential disaster. Everything else is just paperwork and testimony. The sergeant's right, the commander agreed, and I want you to know that you'll have full support throughout this process. What you've done today has national security implications, and you'll be treated with the respect and protection that deserves. As Sarah absorbed all of this information, she realized that her life had fundamentally changed in the space of a few hours. She had gone from being a junior security guard worried about making mistakes to being a key figure in preventing a major security breach. The recognition was gratifying, but it also came with responsibilities she had never expected to face. 3 hours later, Sarah found herself in the base commander's conference room, surrounded by more high-ranking officers than she had ever seen in one place. The investigation had moved quickly, and preliminary interrogations of the suspects had revealed the scope of their operation. What Sarah had prevented wasn't just an infiltration attempt. It was part of a coordinated intelligence-gathering operation that had been targeting multiple naval installations. Admiral Richardson, the base commander, entered the room with an expression of serious appreciation. Sarah had only seen him from a distance before, and being in his presence was intimidating, despite the supportive atmosphere that had surrounded her all day. "Guard Martinez," the admiral began. "I've been briefed on this morning's events, and I want to personally thank you for your exceptional vigilance and professionalism. What you prevented today could have compromised operational security for our entire Pacific Fleet." Sarah stood at attention, still struggling to believe that these conversations were really happening. "Thank you, sir. I was just following my training." "That's exactly what makes this so remarkable," the admiral replied. "You followed your training perfectly under circumstances that would have challenged much more experienced personnel. But more than that, you demonstrated the kind of judgment that can't be taught. You trusted your instincts when something didn't feel right, and you had the courage to act on those instincts." The SEAL commander, who had remained present throughout the afternoon's proceedings, stepped forward. "Admiral, if I may add something about Guard Martinez's performance today." "Of course, Commander." "What impressed me most wasn't just that she spotted the forged documents, though that was excellent work. What impressed me was her systematic approach to the entire situation. She didn't just notice one suspicious detail and stop there. She continued her inspection, cross-referenced multiple pieces of information, and when she found inconsistencies, she followed proper protocols for escalation." The commander looked directly at Sarah. That kind of thorough, methodical approach under pressure is exactly what we try to develop in special operations personnel. It's rare to see it demonstrated so naturally by someone with only 3 months of experience. Admiral Richardson nodded thoughtfully. "Commander, that raises an interesting point about Guard Martinez's future. Given what she's demonstrated today, I think we need to discuss opportunities for advancement and additional training." Sarah felt her heart rate increase. The idea of career advancement had seemed impossible that morning when she was just focused on getting through another day of routine gate duty. "Sir," she said hesitantly, "I appreciate the recognition, but I'm not sure I understand what kinds of opportunities you're referring to." Sergeant Williams, who had been present for most of the afternoon's meetings, stepped forward. "Martinez, what the Admiral and Commander are talking about is the possibility of advanced security training, potentially leading to positions with greater responsibility and higher clearance levels. The military and the Department of Defense are always looking for people who demonstrate exceptional judgment and attention to detail," the Admiral explained. "What you did today suggests that you might be well suited for more specialized security roles, potentially including counterintelligence work." The SEAL commander added, "There are also opportunities within special operations support units for personnel with your demonstrated capabilities. Not everyone in the special operations community is a trigger puller, Guard Martinez. We also need people who can spot threats, analyze intelligence, and maintain operational security." Sarah felt overwhelmed by the possibilities being presented to her. That morning, her biggest career aspiration had been to eventually become a supervisor at one of the base's security checkpoints. Now she was hearing about opportunities she had never imagined could be available to someone like her. "I don't know what to say," she admitted. "This is all happening so fast, and I'm still trying to process everything that's occurred today." Admiral Richardson smiled understandingly. "Guard Martinez, no one expects you to make any major career decisions right now. What we want you to know is that you've demonstrated abilities that open doors to opportunities most people never get to consider. Take time to think about what interests you and what kind of future you want to build. In the meantime," Sergeant Williams added, "you'll be receiving formal recognition for your actions today. That recognition will become part of your permanent record and will support any applications for advanced training or specialized positions you might want to pursue." "Admiral, there's one more thing I'd like to discuss regarding Guard Martinez recognition." "What do you have in mind, Commander?" "I'd like to recommend that Guard Martinez receive formal recognition not just within this base, but at the district and potentially the national level. What she prevented today has implications that extend far beyond Naval Base San Diego. The intelligence these infiltrators might have gathered could have affected operations throughout the Pacific Theater." Admiral Richardson considered this carefully. "That's an excellent suggestion, Commander. Guard Martinez, how would you feel about receiving recognition that might involve ceremonies, media attention, and visibility beyond this base?" Sarah felt a familiar surge of anxiety about public attention, but she also recognized the honor being offered.
"Sir, if my actions today were significant enough to warrant that level of recognition, then I'm honored to accept it. I just hope I can represent the base and the Navy appropriately." "Guard Martinez," the SEAL commander said with conviction, "based on everything I've observed about your character and judgment today, I have complete confidence in your ability to represent us well in any setting." The meeting continued for another hour, covering practical matters like Sarah's testimony for the prosecution, security protocols for the ongoing investigation, and preliminary discussions about career development opportunities. Throughout these conversations, Sarah found herself gradually adjusting to the idea that her life was changing in ways she had never anticipated. As the meeting concluded, Admiral Richardson approached Sarah personally. "Guard Martinez, I want to leave you with one final thought about today's events. What you did wasn't just about following procedures or demonstrating good judgment, though you did both of those things exceptionally well." He paused, looking directly at her. "What you did was embody the principle that every person in uniform, regardless of rank or position, has a responsibility to protect our nation's security. You took that responsibility seriously, and when the moment came to act on it, you didn't hesitate." Sarah felt the full weight of these words. She had never thought of herself as someone who would play a role in national security, but she was beginning to understand that security was built through the accumulated actions of thousands of people doing their jobs with dedication and skill. "Thank you, sir. I promise to continue living up to that responsibility." As Sarah left the conference room and walked back toward Gate 3 to complete her shift, she reflected on how dramatically her world had changed in a single day. That morning, she had been a junior security guard worried about her competence and hoping to avoid mistakes. Now she was being recognized for exceptional performance and being offered opportunities she had never dreamed possible. But perhaps most importantly, she had learned something fundamental about herself. When faced with a situation that demanded judgment, courage, and action, she had risen to meet those demands. The SEAL Commander's salute hadn't just been recognition of what she had accomplished, it had been acknowledgement of who she was capable of becoming. When Sarah reached Gate 3, she found that word of the morning's events had spread throughout the base. Personnel from various units stopped by throughout the afternoon to congratulate her and express their appreciation for her vigilance. Each interaction reinforced the lesson that security was a collective responsibility, and that excellence in seemingly routine duties could have profound implications. As her shift ended that evening, Sarah looked back on the gate where everything had started. Gate 3 looked exactly the same as it had that morning, but she knew that her relationship to this place and to her role had been fundamentally transformed. She was no longer just checking IDs and processing routine paperwork. She was a guardian of national security who had proven herself capable of rising to meet extraordinary challenges. The SEAL Commander's salute had been more than recognition.
It had been a welcome into a community of people who understood the weight of responsibility and the importance of excellence in service. Sarah Martinez, who had started the day worried about her competence as a security guard, was ending it as someone who had earned the respect of the most elite warriors in the military. And as she walked away from Gate 3, for what she somehow knew would be the last time in her current role, Sarah carried with her the confidence that comes from discovering capabilities you never knew you possessed, and the knowledge that when duty called she had answered with distinction.